IMF
Absolutely.
and Bitcoin. So last week we saw that El Salvador has issued a Bitcoin bond, or at least they're raising funds for it. That was in partnership with Blockstream, which is a Bitcoin company. They're raising $1 billion to make a Bitcoin city in El Salvador. The IMF came out on Monday with this new release saying, hey, we don't like that you guys are really using Bitcoin as legal tender. And also, we have a lot of concerns about that bond that you're issuing. So in this paper, the IMF does its yearly reviews of all the countries that it's involved with, that it's giving money to kind of help with economic development. They're saying, hey, like this Bitcoin development is not something that we want to be a part of. You guys should not be using Bitcoin as a legal tender. Furthermore, you should not be subsidizing Chivo, which is this Bitcoin wallet that the El Salvadorian state has been sponsoring. So pretty interesting to see them kind of come out, lobby hard against this Bitcoin development in El Salvador. IMF obviously is a huge global banking aid partner set up for between the US, Europe, and other partners like after World War II. Now they're going after Bitcoin. Naomi, I want to throw this up over to you. We talked about this last week with the Bitcoin bond that Blockstream and El Salvador were issuing. We were kind of scratching our heads over like the logistics and the economics of it. Now IMF is also asking questions, and I don't like being on the side of the IMF, and I'm guessing you don't either.
I don't either. I mean, I am not on the side of Bukele either. Everyone who's like fangirling and fanboying Bukele, I'm not really part of that scene, even though I am interested, obviously, in the proliferation of Bitcoin across the world. I think that could be done voluntarily, though. I mean, regarding the IMF, this isn't the first time that they've cautioned against a nation that's been exploring cryptocurrency. So 2018, they told Marshall Islands not to use crypto, and it was very like passive aggressive, threatening tones. So they said at the time that, you know, they had fears over its dependence on external aid and the threat of natural disasters in the region, and that, you know, using cryptocurrency could undermine this aid that they're getting. It's basically saying, like, if you adopt a cryptocurrency as your legal tender, then you will stop getting aid from us. So it's, I mean, they definitely do hold the purse strings to a lot of these countries. So they do get to dictate policy for them. It's like a strange situation. It's not just IMF, it's also FATF. I mean, we think of these organizations that like we never elected in, and yet somehow they get to control a lot of our lives. FATF is another one. And it's the Financial Action Task Force. And they've like threatened Malta before. It was like Malta was kind of heading towards being this crypto mecca of the world. And then there were rumors that, you know, FATF was going to graylist them because of their involvement with cryptocurrency. And then Malta just kind of walked back all their policies. And again, it's like these organizations that no one elects in, and they just put out these threats. And because they have this kind of network of member states, they're able to use a lot of leverage to force their position and to, coerce other countries into following their policies without technically having teeth. It's just a recommendation agency, but it ends up having quite a lot of teeth. So what's going on in El Salvador, it is interesting that now they're starting to come down. I'm surprised it didn't happen earlier. I'm surprised that we weren't hearing a lot of stuff about this, and I'm surprised that El Salvador is able to kind of experiment with this new monetary policy and move away from US dollar, because they definitely don't like experimentation. But I'll throw it to you, Jen, for your take on all this.
Yeah, I mean, we've come so far into the experiment. I really just want to see how this plays out. I think both Bukele and the IMF have their own interests in reshaping the El Salvador economy, and so this is surprising to me. But the IMF really doesn't, I mean, Naomi, you spoke about it, doesn't have a great track record. And Will, I'm wondering, can give us a little history lesson, a little background in the IMF's relationship with El Salvador?
Yeah, I can speak a little bit more to like the IMF in general than necessarily like the relationship between the IMF and El Salvador. The IMF is just created with the World Bank as a means of kind of like moving money from developed nations to less developed nations and propping them up by giving them loans. But in order to give those loans, you have to meet certain criteria. And the IMF sends advisors, and they send kind of like central planners to those countries, say like, hey, here's your budget. This is the loan we can give you. This is the economic development that we want to see happening. And they've been doing this for 5 decades at this point, maybe even a little bit longer. And it really just came out of World War II and the push for developing a lot of these countries in Africa, Central America, South America, and elsewhere. A lot of critics out there have pointed out that the IMF, the World Bank, kind of use these purse strings to change the policies of these small countries. And when it comes down to it, it's the IMF is run by countries like the United States and by countries in Western Europe, which means that we just have like more control of these developed nations over these underdeveloped nations. And that's a key point that the Bukele regime has been making here, is that you have the US and you have other larger global superpowers using this money bag to kind of choose what Bitcoin standard or what kind of monetary standard the El Salvadorian people use, which of course is just vastly unfair. They're a sovereign nation. They should be able to use whatever kind of monetary system they want. But Naomi, I'll give it to you for final thoughts and next subject.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting to see everything playing out in El Salvador. On the one hand, we have this head of state who's calling the shots, and we're not used to that. We're used to sort of grassroots movements, but we have this head of state who's like, we're pursuing Bitcoin. And I tend to not really be on the same side as head of states a lot of time as well. But now we have this head of state versus IMF. Like, it's very interesting how the dynamics of the world are really shifting. We've got these tectonic plates that are like crossing over, and like there's all kinds of interesting stuff going on that I'm sure none of us expected. And it's very interesting to see all of that get
really
mixed
quick.
up. Yeah.
Really quick, I want to jump back to the Bitcoin bond that we talked about last week. I saw Samson Mao, as the CSO of Blockstream, talking about it on Bloomberg. And he had made a really good case for why it's a good financial tool. And I only bring it up because last week we were critiquing it on the stream, talking about like why it might not be a good tool for people getting invested into Bitcoin. But it does make sense on one level. If you want to be a corporation that can't hold Bitcoin on a balance sheet but can hold bonds, well, you can just purchase this. And it acts as a proxy for Bitcoin. So I think that's also an interesting part about this, is that this Bitcoin bond came out right when the IMF was stating that it's not in favor of all the Bitcoin maneuvers that Bukele has been making. And it seems to be like escalating a lot going into the Christmas season.